how to build your 3-bucket strategy.
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Yeah, Brian, I am super excited about this show because one of the questions we get all the times is, guys, can you talk to me more about this 3-bucket strategy? These 3 buckets I'm supposed to build as I'm building up towards financial independence. What does that mean? How do I do it? Why does it matter? So we thought, okay, today we'll do a deep dive.
Yeah, the 3 buckets, I got to tell you, this is foundational knowledge to your wealth building journey. When I mention 3 buckets, let's just go ahead and there's no mystery here. We'll go ahead and tell you what they are. We're talking about your tax deferred bucket. This is like your qualified retirement plans, your 401ks, your 403bs, your IRAs, and so forth. They're all growing tax deferred. We also have your tax free. We all get excited about tax free. That's your Roth accounts, your Roth IRAs, your Roth 401ks, your Roth 403bs, and so forth. And then the last of the 3 bucket strategy is, of course, your after tax. That's your liquid, meaning liquid investments that have already after tax. You've paid taxes on them. You've earned the income. You've paid the taxes. Now you get to spend them how you see fit.
And here's the real reason why we like to focus on them. All 3 of the tax buckets are treated differently. So when you get to financial independence, if you've built all 3 of them adequately, you can pick and choose your circumstance. But you don't want to just think about this on the day before you retire. It's one of the reasons why on our brand new net worth template that we just released, on our dashboard, we actually have shown for you where your tax buckets are right now. Because one of the things you need to think about as you progress through your wealth building journey is, how am I building each one of those tax buckets?
Well, I think human nature is when you do your net worth, use our net worth tool, all humans like to see things equalized.
Sure. Yep.
So you look at this, you're like, well, I want a third, right? And and that's why we wanted to do this show, is because that is unrealistic. I think the 3 bucket strategy is going to look different for 20-year-olds versus the way it looks for 50-year-olds.
Yep.
So we wanted to kind of give you the clarity to know where you should be on your wealth journey.
All right, so let's start sort of at the very beginning. Let's talk about folks in their 20s. These are the folks who are at the very beginning of their career, very early onset. How should they be thinking about their tax buckets? What things should they be focusing on?
Let me go ahead and give you a little relief. The majority of you, even if you've discovered this, you're a financial mutant, in our 20s, we don't have resources. We don't have money. I mean, I was broke when I was in my 20s. I know you and I have talked about it, coming from humble beginnings, and that's okay. So a lot of you are going to say, well, I don't have money. So when y'all talking about the 3 buckets, my buckets are pretty empty right now.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because you have the most valuable resources that you have so much time to build on. We want to talk to you about, through like the financial order of operations, what is the best use for your next dollar so you maximize the opportunities here.
And if you haven't checked it out yet, go to moneyguy.com/resources. You can download a free deliverable of our financial order of operations, because it is going to be your friend as you begin thinking about your tax buckets. So for folks in their 20s, when we think about our 3 distinct tax buckets, the one place where we think you'll probably get the most excited and will probably begin to be built first is probably the tax deferred bucket, because of free money.
Yeah, free money. I tell you guys all the time, this is one of the greatest things about when you start working in your first real job and you get benefits and you find out your employer is giving you 50 cents on the dollar or dollar for dollar matching, or maybe they even do non-elective deferrals where just for showing up, they're going to put a percentage of your income into a retirement account. That's all free money. We always want you to maximize that, because especially if there's like a matching formula, think about it, if it's 50 cents on the dollar, that is a guaranteed 50% rate of return. If it's dollar for dollar, guaranteed 100% rate of return. There's nothing else out there like that. So you have to maximize those returns. So that's why, and here's the reality of why this is tax deferred. For your employer to take the deduction to get that benefit, they have to, they're going to put it in tax deferred, meaning the government's going to give them the deduction for that contribution in your account. You're going to be able to let it grow tax deferred, meaning every year you're not going to pay income taxes on the growth, but eventually when you pull that money out in retirement, Uncle Sam is going to want to take their cut.
So I'm going to say it a little bit differently. When you go to elect your 401k or your retirement contributions, you get to choose tax deferred or tax free, because a lot of plans now have a Roth option. The employer money always goes into that tax deferred bucket. So naturally, even if you're doing Roth contributions, you're going to get some tax deferred dollars being built up when you're in your 20s.
So more than likely, your employer portion for sure will be tax deferred. Now let's talk about what's exciting to me is that second bucket, the tax free.
That's right. This is most often when we think about tax-free assets, we think about a Roth IRA. And for most young folks, this is the area that I always tell them when you're going to start your wealth building journey, when you're going to start building towards financial independence, a Roth IRA is probably the single best place for you to start.
But tell us, because a lot of people have curiosity, what makes Roth so great?
Yeah, so there's a number of benefits that come with a Roth. I mean, obviously, when you put money into a Roth, you're not getting a tax deduction on the front end, but there are a plethora of benefits that you get while you have the Roth. Here's one of them. No required minimum distributions. When you get to age 72 and you have 401ks or IRAs or 457s, the government makes you lose some of your tax flexibility. They make you start pulling money out of those accounts. That's not true with Roth IRAs. Another great benefit of Roth IRAs is a lot of providers have really low cost plans where you can open an account, no fees, you can buy very low cost index funds and pay low internal expenses. So it's a very cost effective way to build up your wealth. In addition to that, as you invest those dollars, they will grow tax free, assuming you meet certain types of distributions. You're over 59 and a half and the account's been open for at least 5 years. So not only do the earnings grow tax free, you also get to pull the money out completely tax free.
Yeah, and what I like about most of these retirement options, Roth IRAs specifically, you get complete access to the investment universe.
That's right.
I mean, if you think about, we talk about index investing. We love it because it's low cost, it's tax efficient, and so forth. If you want to go look at Fidelity Investments, Vanguard, Charles Schwab, all the low cost providers, you can do that in your Roth IRAs.
That's exactly right. And then the last thing that we really love about Roths is you have some flexibility with your contributions. We know that you can put up to $6,000 a year into a Roth IRA, but you don't have to put in $6,000 a year. If all you can do is you're starting out, and this is the very first dollar that you can save, and you're only able to save $20 a month, that's great. A Roth IRA will provide a mechanism, so long as you meet the requirements, where you can do that.
Now, Bo, I'm going to give pay some, I don't want to say respect, but I'm definitely going to give the trolls some action here.
Okay, sure.
Because they get mad when I talk about Roth accounts grow tax-free. Because there is a catch with Roth accounts in the fact that when you put the money into whether it's a Roth IRA, a Roth 401k, a Roth 403b, any of the tax-free accounts, you don't get a deduction
That's right.
on that contribution. That is the rub, because if you put it in a traditional account, like a traditional 401k, a traditional 403b, the government, just like they gave your employer a deduction on the match, when you put it in on the traditional side as an employee with your salary deferrals, you also get a deduction on your tax return, so it lowers your current taxes. Roth accounts don't get that benefit.
That's right.
But anything that grows out of it, meaning you put $10 in, that $10 turns to $100, 90 out of that $100 is going to be completely tax-free. That's pretty powerful, and we've actually created an illustration to give you an example.
Yeah, let's talk about this in very real, very practical terms. Let's look at the power of tax-free accounts. So let's say that you have two individuals that are going to contribute to a Roth IRA or to an IRA, and they're going to max it out at $6,000 every year. You have one who's going to do the traditional version. They're going to put money into a traditional IRA. They're going to get a tax deduction. We're going to assume in our illustration that they spend that tax savings. So they're not going to be disciplined and save that. They're going to take that tax deduction. They're going to spend the tax savings. And then we have another individual who's going to invest $6,000 in Roth. So one's putting $6,000 in traditional. One is putting $6,000 in a Roth. So that way we're comparing apples to apples in terms of dollar invested. Well, if they can earn 8% over the next 40 years in these accounts, at the end of that time period, after 40 years, they would both have portfolios of $1,745,504.
Yeah, that's linear math.
That's
I mean,
linear
they're
math.
equal to exactly the same amount. Now, you said something key, and I think it's worth repeating,
Sure.
keeping people at bay. the person that funded the Roth, even though they're funding after tax, in a way they are funding more
Sure.
because the traditional might have gotten a tax
That's right.
benefit. The Roth did not. So there is something that puts the hand on the scale. But that tax-free growth, when you see the multiplier effect, there's a reason I have this on my koozie. That $1 can become $88 if you're given enough time. Wait until you see what that looks like when it's completely tax-free.
So at the end of their investing journey, when they go to pull out the money, the Roth contributor who had grown their portfolio to $1.7 million, their portfolio is actually worth $1.7 million. But if we assume a tax rate of 25%, when the person in the traditional IRA built $1.7 million and they go to pull that out, it's actually only worth about $1.3 million. Roth Rachel, or the Roth contributor, actually had $400,000 more in spendable dollars at retirement, which is pretty powerful.
So remember, we're talking about 20-somethings right now. Guys, I know if you're in your 20s, you're not earning your peak dollars yet. That's going to come to in your late 40s, early 50s. I get it. You're thinking every dollar needs to go towards lifestyle or just paying the mortgage or paying the rent. I want you to squeeze, just do something, because every dollar with that multiplier effect is so powerful. We've talked about Roth IRAs and Roth accounts with your employer. There is another account that grows tax-free.
Yeah, this is a health savings account. If you've heard us talk about it, you've heard us mention before, it is one of the most exciting, most powerful vehicles in the entire investment universe, because most often it is triple tax advantage.
Well, I feel like, because I loved on Roth accounts a lot.
Yeah, sure.
Because you know, I get excited. I want 20-somethings especially to get excited about that tax-free growth opportunity. But there was a flaw with Roth IRAs in the fact that you do not get a tax deduction on the initial contribution. It's only the growth long-term that's truly growing tax-free. HSAs, because they are triple tax advantage, correct that problem.
Yep, so there are a few benefits. Now, first of all, unfortunately, HSAs are not available to everyone. You do have to be participating in a high deductible health plan to be eligible to contribute to an HSA. So assuming your health insurance satisfies that requirement and you can open up a health savings account, here are the benefits. Brian already mentioned this. You get a tax deduction on the contributions you put in, no matter your income. So if you make $1 million a year, you put money into an HSA, you get a tax deduction on that contribution. You can then invest those dollars if you so choose, and those assets grow tax deferred. You don't have to pay taxes while they're growing in the account. And then later on, when you decide to pull that money out, if you use the distributions for qualified medical expenses, they are completely tax-free.
So that's tremendous benefit there if you think about it. Plus, there's actually one more benefit in the fact that you get to, if you run this through your employer plan, it is going to offset, meaning you're not going to have to pay payroll taxes on that employer benefit. And there's one other, we could have put one more asterisk in the fact that if you get to 65 years of age and you've saved more in your health savings account than what you're going to need in healthcare, you can use this as a closeted retirement account. It's just that you won't get the tax-free component on all the growth elements.
Now, we talk about this all the time, Brian, because we've looked at the numbers. We know the analytics associated with health savings accounts. 96% of health savings account users don't actually use them this way. They actually put the money in, they use the dollars. If you can be part of that 4% who actually invest those dollars, this can be a huge tool in your financial tool belt.
I do think we had this discussion earlier. It might be aspirational for a 20-something because it depends on how healthy or how little you're using your health insurance. Because hopefully you are in the healthy part of your life where you're not going to the doctor a lot. So there is a chance that you put that money in the health savings account. If you're not using it for current medical expenses, maybe you wait a year or so and then you deploy it once you can cover some of the deductible thresholds or even the out-of-pocket thresholds. You just want to make sure you are covered, because I understand resources are tight in your 20s, but if you can maximize the exponential growth, it's awesome.
So then there is this third bucket. We've talked about tax deferred. We've talked about tax free. Unfortunately, that third bucket, the after-tax bucket, might be hard for folks to build in your 20s. We've already talked about it. In our 20s, most of us are broke. There's not a lot of discretionary income lying around. And once we've done the tax deferred piece and once we've done the tax free piece and we're following the financial order of operations, there might not be a ton left over. And in your 20s, that's okay.
Yeah, I would. Now, I'm not going to let everybody off scot-free.
Sure.
Meaning that you do have to have some after tax. There's a reason when we talk about the financial order of operations, step one is deductibles covered.
Yep.
You do not want some little thing or something that just should be $1,000, $2,000 derail your financial life completely, where you have to go to credit cards or you have to go worse to payday lenders or something like that. So you've got to make sure you have deductibles covered, which is step one of our financial order of operations. Then step 4 is actually emergency reserves.
right.
But realize between step 1 and 4, we understand there's where that tax deferred employer free money comes in. And that's also where getting out of that high interest debt comes in also with step 3.
All right, Brian. So we've talked about the 20s. We've talked about the folks who are kind of starting off on their financial journey. Now let's shift and let's talk about the 30s. And one of the things I think that's interesting that happens in your 30s is in your 20s, you got really excited about free money. And I think in your 30s, you are still really, really excited about free money. But as your financial life progresses and as circumstances change, what I've found is one of the things that I think gets the most exciting in your 30s is not having to pay as much in taxes, looking for ways and means and mechanisms to not have to lose some of your hard-earned dollars to Uncle Sam.
Yeah, I think the 30s, because it's a mixed bag. And we have producer Reby. I don't know if she loves this slide, but I love it. I actually get excited when we show this because this is a slide that shows your financial stages of life. And this will reflect exactly what Bo was kind of talking about. Because we show you that we have the green line. If you're, I'm going to describe this for those who are not watching this on YouTube. Maybe you're out there listening to the podcast. We have a green line that shows right after you graduate, whether it's high school, whether it's college. It's low. You're not, but any little thing you pick up, you're making a lot of use out of it. And the good news is when you're young, you don't have a lot of commitments.
That's right.
Pulling on that disposable income. So if you graduate in your 20s, I mean, you're still reminiscing when you could make $10 last 3 days.
A whole weekend,
because
yeah.
you're getting the top ramen, you're doing the peanut butter and jelly and the loaf of bread. You've got it all figured out at that point. But unfortunately with life, you realize as your income, your disposable income starts going up, your commitments of life also start going up because what will happen is that you'll meet that significant other.
Yep.
You'll get married. Well, that has expenses. You'll want to buy that first house because that typically happens. I mean, the median age I think in the United States is 33.
33, that's right.
So so that's definitely pulling on. And then you start the kiddos too. You start having children and growing
Not
the family.
inexpensive.
Guys, all of this stuff, this is why we call it the messy middle. This is the part of your life where you're going, man, I'm starting to get some traction financially, but I'm also, it feels like everything in the world is pulling on my back pocket right now. This is why it's important for us now to talk about the 3-bucket strategy because you got to prioritize every dollar because, man, your life might be in literal chaos.
Yeah, so I already said this, right? Like one of the things, because it is this messy middle, because it is this thing where there's not a lot of disposable income lying around, one of the reasons you may get very excited about building up that first bucket, that tax deferred bucket, is because it will offer you some tax reprieve. It will provide a mechanism where you don't have to send Uncle Sam as much money. Retirement plans are one of the best places to legally hide money from the government.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. I built my first business off of this whole tactic.
Sure.
When I started my first financial planning firm in early 2000s, I didn't have any clients.
Sure.
I was a little aspirational on, hey, if I build it, they will come. That doesn't necessarily
work that way.
especially if you come from humble beginnings, because I don't think there was a lot of people from my past that were thinking to line up because they had the resources. So I built the first part of my wealth planning career was I was helping people look at their taxes, look at small business owners and others on how you maximize legally avoiding taxes. And it works out well. And I want to encourage you to do the exact same thing. Legally, figure out how do you structure your investments to be the most tax efficient possible.
Yeah, I think it's always funny. I'll have friends ask me, hey, Bo, will you review my tax return? And I'll be like, oh, yeah, sure. And I'll look through it. Hey, I noticed this thing. And, you missed this on your taxes. If you were to do this, you'd save $100, $200, $300 in tax. Like, oh, it's not worth it. I'm like, are you kidding me? Do you realize what an extra $100, $200, $300 can do over the next 30 or 40 years for you? So every little bit you can optimize early on in your 30s, when you do have tons of time left, you should certainly take advantage of it.
I think it's interesting. Financial order of operations, without a doubt, will make you wealthy if you walk through the journey and go through the process. But the majority of people, if I looked at their tax return and I found them $300 on their tax return, they're going to get more excited about that current because it's bird in hand, cash in hand right now versus the system. That's why there's definitely a frothy market for saving taxes, and that's why tax deferred, as Bo said, figure out how you can maximize your tax deductions and for sure take advantage of that employer free money.
So we talked about in your 20s, tax-free dollars are something to be super, super excited about. Well, in your 30s, tax dollars are still something that you should be very, very excited about, but you might begin to run into some roadblocks as it relates to tax-free dollars in your 30s. Here's the first one. If you are contributing to a Roth IRA, they limit how much you can put in there. You can only put in $6,000 a year. If you're married, you can put in $6,000 for a spouse. And you can't really build it up any bigger than that. Now, you can do Roth 401k deferrals, but again, remember, if you think about your tax deferred bucket, every dollar you opt to put in the Roth portion of your employer plan, you're going to pay more taxes on. So you're kind of limited in your 30s with how much you can actually build up these buckets.
Yeah, the big thing, pay attention to your income. If you're a single individual, the phase out on Roth IRA contributions is between $129,000 to $144,000. For a married couple, you have to pay attention to somewhere around $204,000 to $214,000 is the phase out. It is going to be a restriction. Now, here's the good news. If you're under those thresholds, pay attention to the fact that why would the government restrict your ability to contribute unless they understand how valuable of a resource this actually is? So use this as motivation to know I've got to prioritize on building that tax-free bucket.
Now, maybe if you are over that income limit, there are still options available like backdoor Roths, like mega backdoors, but frankly, we don't know how long those will be around based on legislative inklings right now. So you want to prioritize building those tax-free dollars when you can. And then the other way that you build tax-free assets is through health savings accounts. Well, unfortunately, and I'm literally living this right now, in your 30s, there's a good chance you're going to have medical expenses. All the kids, they got bumps, bruises, boo-boos, broken bones, Band-Aids, all these other B words. You might actually have to tap into those HSA dollars to be able to cover some of those medical expenses.
Yeah, we shared it when we were talking about the 20s that 96% of health savings accounts are just clearing accounts, meaning you put the money in, yes, you take the tax deduction, but you're not investing. You're not letting it, grow tax deferred. And if you use it for qualified expenses decades in the future, it's tax free. That's how you get to the triple tax advantage. In your 20s, you're probably not having a lot of things going on. You're healthy, you don't have kids, so you're probably going to be more likely to be part of that 4%, unfortunately, in your 20s. I understand in the early part, especially the early part of your 30s, when you first have children, you're buying that first home, you might have a lot of things. So I'm going to give you the grace to understand it's okay if you're using it as a clearing account, but do put the pressure on yourself that as your income continues to expand, that you prioritize taking advantage of that 4% opportunity of actually using the triple tax advantage and not letting lifestyle get away from you.
Now, we talked about also in your 20s, the after-tax bucket, the third bucket in your three bucket strategy might not be getting a lot of love and attention. Well, there's a good chance in your 30s, this is where you might actually start building that bucket because perhaps there are some life circumstances that change. Maybe your income has grown to the point where you can finally start saving 25%. And to do so, you've maxed out your employer options and you've maxed out your IRA options, and you still have a little bit extra room to get to that 25%. The place that you're going to do that is inside of an after-tax brokerage or individual type account.
Yeah, I always think about this from a life experience and where do you build that technical expertise. In your 20s, I was building so much knowledge. I didn't make a ton of money. My income was not there because I was still building my craft. But you will catch on in your 30s. you're going to break six figures.
Yep.
You're also going to start, getting a premium for your knowledge and your skill set, that it's more likely that you will exceed the savings rate of 20 to 25% than you could in your 20s. I'm just telling you, when you reach that point of saving 20, 25%, you do need to start paying attention to, you can only put so much in a Roth IRA. You can only put so much into your retirement accounts at work, that you probably will, because right now in 2022, it's $20,500 in that employer plan. If you get to 25% and you've already maxed out the employer plan, the after tax is going to be that fill in the gap bucket strategy. Because a lot of people, they think after tax means just cash. That's not the case. You can actually buy long-term investments. That's where you go open up the Fidelity, the Vanguard, or the Charles Schwab brokerage account, and you can buy long-term investments in those accounts just like you can in your Roth IRAs and your 401ks and so forth. It doesn't have to just be cash and that's it.
As your income increases, and this is sort of a case study because we see this time and time again with successful folks. As your income increases, you get really excited about these milestones that you hit. Yeah, I maxed out my Roths. Yes, I maxed out my 401k. And I was saving 25% of my base pay. But then year end comes around and you get a bonus, or maybe you get some incentives, or maybe you get RSUs or options, or something like that hits your compensation. Don't forget, that's part of your household income. So you need to make sure as those things happen, you're saving 25% of those things. And for most folks, if you've already exhausted your other options, the after-tax account is where that's going to happen for you.
Let's talk about something I know a little bit about, 40s.
Okay, love it.
Here's the thing, guys. I think that there's a lot of us that feel like we're imposters because we, in our 20s and 30s, we're part of that. 20s were broke, 30s is the messy middle. I just felt like when I was in these periods, yes, I was prioritized saving, but I was all putting it into retirement accounts. And it was one of those things, you get in your 40s and you're like, when does it actually start to feel easy? When do I get that margin to actually enjoy life? If you are getting close to your 40s, that's likely where it happened. Look, the reason I'm confessing this and sharing this is that I know there's going to be other financial mutants in your 20s and 30s, and you're like, does it get easier? I feel like there's a lot of sacrifice going on here, and I want to know, where does life start feeling better? It's just, I feel like Papa Smurf. It's just right over the hill, because I'm telling you, this is the decade where if you've done it right in your 20s and 30s, your 40-something self will be like, job well done. Now we can start pulling off of the accelerator, because maybe we did it right early enough. We can start thinking bigger about what we can do long term.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the specific tax buckets in your 40s. Well, when you think about your first bucket, your tax deferred bucket, I think this one is really exciting in your 40s because, according to Ramsey Solutions, most millionaires, when they reach millionaire status, it happens in large part due to their 401k, due to the tax deferred bucket that they've been funding at their job.
Have you ever thought about why that is? I think about this all the time from a behavioral standpoint. I think, and this is something you ought to reflect on. I'm going a little off script here on the way you think about everything. It's because it's automatic. I mean, I love how retirement plans force us. You get paid either twice a month or once a month, and they take a percentage of what you get paid and throw it in the markets. It doesn't matter if the market's getting beaten up. It doesn't matter what's going on geopolitically or so forth. You are systematically buying every month. And once you know it, because you're also getting that free money from your employer through the match or contributions from profit sharing, this is the way most millionaires reach that status. I want you to take that and leverage it to the other buckets of your life as well. But this is why tax deferred is the biggest bucket.
Well, and there's actually been studies and analytics and analysis to exactly back that up. Again, according to Ramsey Solution, their national study, they found that when they interviewed, I want to say it was like 10,000 millionaires or something like that, 80% of millionaires said they invested in their company's 401k. That was part of their wealth building journey. And they actually reached millionaire status at age 49. So it is very much in this decade that folks went into that like higher level wealth building. They turned into millionaires.
And then make sure you're maxing it out. I mean, this is the chance where if you've never reached 20,500 or whatever the current year limit is, make that a goal.
Yep,
I mean, push
absolutely.
through that so you can break through that barrier and take it even to more savings. And then, Bo, this is where we can transition also into tax-free. Now, look, I'll be honest. It is easy. The hardest part of doing tax-free investing in your 20s and 30s is having the discipline of living below your means that you have the resources to do it. The problem in your 40s likely is because your income threshold
That's
is
right.
getting where the government is restricting your access to these type of investments.
Yeah, there's a good chance by the time you're in this decade, you've been building assets, hopefully if you're a financial mutant, for the last 20 years. So your tax-free strategy is likely already in place. If you are contributing to a Roth IRA, you've probably continued to contribute to a Roth IRA. If you are putting money into the Roth 401k portion of your 401k, you've probably continued doing that. Well, in your 40s, as you think about being a field general that wants to command your army of dollar bills in the most effective way possible, you ought to annually reassess, am I putting my dollars in the right place? Because you said, Brian, early on in the 20s, it's about having the discipline to contribute to Roth and to tax-free assets. In your 40s, it's about having the knowledge and the intellect to decide, is that actually the best place for me to put my dollars, or might I be served putting them somewhere else, like in a tax-free type bucket?
So let's actually
tax-deferred
give them
bucket.
let's give them some data
Sure.
though, because this is the thing. I think a lot of people, they're like, I hear you. I'm a financial mutant. I need some numbers or data with this. We want to talk about, and let's just give you the nerd language here.
Sure.
Marginal tax rate. That's what the next dollar the federal government taxes you at, or your state marginal rate, which is the next dollar that you earn. What is the state going to tax you at? If you will add the percentages up, so the state, the federal government might be 24%. Your state government might be 6%. If you looked at that, that means the next dollar you make is going to be taxed at 30%. That's your marginal rate is 30%. So we have a pretty easy system here. Now, look, you might need to customize this. I want to put a disclaimer is that this is very general information here.
Sure.
But just thinking about where we think taxes are going. Tax rates likely will have to go up in the long term
Certainly seems
because
that
of
way.
all the commitments that the government has created. So we think anybody who's in a tax bracket, a marginal combined tax bracket of 25% or less, man, Roth is your friend.
That's right.
Because you're definitely paying some historic low rates. 25 to 30%. That's kind of gray zone because there's a chance when you retire in the future, your income will go down because you have less earned income coming in. So maybe your tax rates will actually go down in the future. But we think 25 to 30% is...
It's nuanced.
It's kind of nuanced. You need to know a lot more about what's going on in your financial life to figure out, should you be tax-free Roth contributor or should you be pre-tax and taking the current year deduction? Over 30%, we think, hey, now you're getting into every dollar you put in. If you put any dollar into your retirement, the government's essentially funding a third of that contribution. That's pretty powerful. You're probably looking for ways to minimize your annual tax bill. We think that makes sense to go more traditional with those retirement plans over the 30% marginal rates.
All right, so in our 40s, we've talked about the tax deferred. We're likely maxing out our 401ks, our retirement plans for the first time. We're assessing annually our tax-free bucket, figuring out where our dollars should be going. We already mentioned that in our 30s, that might be when we start to actually be able to dump some money into that after-tax account. Well, in your 40s, you better start getting really serious about what your needs are for your specific situation. If you're someone who's maybe part of the FIRE movement, or you're thinking about you want to leave the workforce early, this very well be the most important bucket that you build over the next 15 to 20 years.
It's not uncommon for me to see prospects or financial mutants come through the doors or reach out to us, and they're doing well. They might even have 7 figures of investment assets. Sure. But you know how many of them are in after tax to buy that next new car with cash versus debt, or to start funding the kids' college? It's actually, there's a lot of you in your 40s, you're going to recognize you are retirement account rich, but not very liquid cash. You don't have a lot of abundance there. So that's why we tell people, pay attention in your 40s that you should be paying attention to. Do you have enough money to buy that car with cash? Do you have enough that you can start contributing to the kids' college accounts? It's going to get very important to start thinking forward on the 3 buckets. That's why Bo even mentioned fire movement people or anybody who thinks they're going to retire I would say even if you go, I say pre-60, so 55, even beyond, before that, you better start building that bridge account ASAP because you're going to need some liquidity in that after-tax account.
Now, I don't want you to hear us wrong. If you're someone who's sitting with $1 million in your 401k, we didn't just tell you that you're in a bad financial circumstance. Remember, everything we talk about is about optimization and maximization. We want you to be able to control your financial circumstance as much as you can. Building a bucket strategy to custom fit your unique needs is just a part of that maximization and optimization. So if you are thinking about those sorts of things early enough in your 40s, you can begin to make accumulation decisions that will make that transition into retirement much more seamless and much more smooth.
Well, and people, it comes down to the nuts and bolts of what does it cost to get $1.
That's
too.
right.
Because, I mean, if you are somebody who's thinking you're going to retire, say, at 50, 55, you're going to find out that those tax-deferred dollars are extremely expensive to get access to. Even if you can get past the penalties and everything else, you're still going to pay ordinary income taxes on them. You want to be careful with that. And then you don't want to be pulling out of your tax-free pot because that's going to be your maximization money that's growing tax-free. Start working on that after-tax account while you're in your 40s and income is really good.
All right, Brian. So we've talked about the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. I'm going to call those sort of practice or maybe the preamble or some other, sort of name for that. Because once you get into the 50s and beyond, this is sort of game time. This is sort of where it matters, the decisions you've been making from an accumulation standpoint. This is where you actually get to see the fruit of your labor for the last 30 years in terms of building up your tax buckets.
Well, this is, you think about it. Most of us come out and start living life as an adult in your 20s.
Yep.
That's probably thank you, Captain Obvious. But it is one of those things, if you look at the math of it, you've been doing this for 30 years, you better start taking some metrics of how well am I doing things. And I will tell you, to toot the horn of our net worth tool, I have several friends that have bought this and they've given me feedback on it. They go, man, I need to be paying better attention to my 3 buckets because I'm in trouble.
Yep.
I'm thinking I'm going to retire here, but where's my money going to come from? Because this is definitely something where you better be measuring twice to make sure you get it right. And it's better to see that metric when you're still years from needing it versus having to scramble right in the last minute and get this right.
Yeah, that's the reason we put it on our net worth dashboard. We think that it's that important. We don't just want you to see your tax buckets when you're 57 years old. We want you to see it when you're 27 years old and when you're 35 years old and when you're 40 years old so that you can be thinking about, okay, what's the reason I'm making these decisions and what's the goal I'm ultimately moving towards? Because when you get into your 50s or when you get into beyond your 50s into financial independence, it's going to matter those decisions that you've made up to this point.
And I think it goes further. I mean, most of my viewers, we're all financial mutants. We're cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways to where when you pay somebody, they have to pull a little harder, especially the bigger the bill, the harder that money is to come out of your hands. A lot of you get to your 50s and you're like, man, I've been pretty successful just on my own, doing it, do it yourself. I'm telling you, you don't know what you don't know. And this is one of those things, we'll give you the tools through like the net worth tool, go to learn.moneyguy.com. But this is also the graduation point where some of you have enough resources. Those blind spots of what you don't know might require that you need a financial advisor or a co-pilot. You're the CEO of this enterprise, but how about bringing in a CFO that can look at this in a more nuanced way and think about those variables that you've done this for the first time. You're on your maiden journey of this. It'd be nice to bring somebody who maybe has a few more reps at this so you can make sure you're doing it right.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the tax buckets in your 50s and beyond. Now, automatically, there's sort of a magic thing that happens when you turn 50. The government decides, you know what, for your birthday present in the year that you turn 50, we're going to let you save a little bit more for retirement. Not only are you able to max out your 401k, we're going to let you start doing catch-up contributions. Not only are we going to let you do your IRA, we're going to let you do catch-up contributions. In your 50s, you do have an increased propensity to save into different tax advantage vehicles. So it's a unique advantage that your 20, 30, and 40-year-old counterparts don't exactly have.
So I'm I'm on a text thread with a group of old neighbors, and one of them today is the birthday of one of my engineering friends.
Okay.
And we hilarious fodder picking on nerdy people as we get older. And he wrote something like, "Man, are we getting old?" And I said, "Look, here's the secret. Quit counting after 50. Because why did I choose 50? It's because of that catch up. It is glorious that the government's going to give us this free opportunity to even put more money in that young people can't do. Take advantage of that. I'm not saying you have to count beyond 50, but I am saying get very excited about that free money that Bo just talked about.
All right, so let's think about the tax deferred bucket. If you've been a financial mutant, you've been making the decisions that you should be making up to this point, there's a chance that this account has started to hit a critical mass. You may very well see that what this account can return or how much it grows over a quarter or over a half a year, over a full year, might be as much as you make in wages, might be as much as you make out there earning. There's a chance that this has become a very large pot of assets, a very large part of your army of dollar bills. So you want to make sure the decisions you're making around it are wise decisions in terms of providing for the rest of your financial life.
So you're Captain Excitement. You just gave
I think it's a good thing.
You gave all the positives of why it's awesome that your money has reached a critical mass where it truly is replacing what you can make with your hands, your back, and your hand. Your brain.
Your hands, your back, your brain.
Yeah, I left the brain out.
Hands, back,
I'm
hands,
going to be the Debbie.
back, hands.
I'm going to be the Debbie Downer of this situation. This is another reason why I love our net worth tool. Is that learn.moneyguy.com is because when you do your net worth in this, it's not going to give you that false bravado that you're doing awesome, because we put deferred taxes on our net worth tool, because it is one of those things. Bo said it's replacing months, potentially years, because it's reached this critical mass. It's also important that you don't get too full of yourself and take your foot off the accelerator because you haven't taken into account that you're in business with Uncle Sam. He still has to pull his cut out at some point in the future. So every dollar of those retirement accounts might be pretty expensive to access.
We see this all the time, right, Brian? We'll have retirees like, "Hey, I just retired, but my junior has one more semester of college." Right? Great. And I was, "How much is it?" "Oh, it's $20,000. Okay, great." You realize to get you $20,000, we got to pull $35,000 out of your account. Or, "Hey, I need that new car. Hey, we want to do that renovation." These dollars are expensive to get through. So you need to have that realization that if you are a pre-tax millionaire at retirement, you might not be a purchasing power millionaire at retirement. So you want to make sure you think through that.
I'm going to do something. This is a little counter. Let's go. If we talk about tax-free.
Okay.
If you're a financial mutant in your 50s, you're going to look at you, especially if you're using the net worth tool, and we have the 3-bucket strategy right in front of you. You're going to see you have lots of tax deferred because you got your employer money. You're old enough that maybe you didn't have as much access to the tax-free stuff. You're going to have after-tax money because you're a financial mutant. You didn't waste any money, but you're going to look and you're like,
what's going on?
That tax-free is the smallest. Now, and look, we have, it's on the screen right now. We love, if your income is high, while it's still available, we love backdoor conversion strategy opportunities. We like the mega backdoor Roth IRA. Those things are important. But this is where I'm going to let you break rules because you have so much abundance and you've done things so well on your 20 to 25% savings that I actually have people who they've done the financial planner, and now we're figuring out maybe the Roth accounts are better from a legacy standpoint, or looking at the 3-bucket strategy, that part of our 401k, maybe even though it would benefit me to contribute to the traditional, I have so many assets there. Why not throw some money into that Roth account so I can try to build up that tax-free account just from a legacy estate planning and other type of opportunities that come from that. That stuff comes into the higher level once you graduate from the 9 steps of financial order of operations.
Now, a lot of what we've talked about has been talking through accumulation, right? And so one of the questions you probably ask is, okay, so I do this net worth statement every single year. And then when I retire, I just stop doing it. And I just stop looking about, I don't worry about my tax buckets. No, that's not true at all. Because one of the things, if you are someone who's retiring in their 50s or maybe in their late 50s or in their 60s, or really any time before you get to age 70 or age 72, there might even be a part of your plan where you want to, that big pre-tax bucket that you've built up, you might want to think about, hey, should I try to start converting some of these dollars into my tax-free bucket before I start drawing Social Security, before I make that pension election, before I have to start drawing RMDs? Because again, the tax bucket strategy isn't just for the day before you retire and the day after you retire. It's for all through your accumulation phase and all through your decumulation phase so that you can maximize every dollar in your army of dollar bills.
The third bucket is that after-tax bucket, Bo, and I think that it's important. I love that we talked about this in the content meeting to talk about the strategy you ought to, and I love that we have an actual representation so you can visually see this on how the buckets fill up realistically as you get older, 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, but also when you switch from saver to spender, how does the money and the resources come out of the buckets in retirement? This is something we ought to talk about because after-tax accounts are definitely going to be that bridge account that you access first when you do retire.
That's exactly right. This, if you are an early retiree, this account type is a necessity. Like you got to have it. It's got to be there because exactly what you said. Your order of operations is very different in decumulation than it is in accumulation. Remember, if you're working through the financial order of operations and you're going to begin saving and building assets, often the first thing that's going to go into your bucket is the Roth dollars. Well, then once you get your Roth dollars in the bucket, then you're going to get in your pre-tax dollars. You're going to max out your employer-sponsored plan. Well, once you've gotten those two parts in the bucket, you're likely going to start focusing on after-tax. So that's kind of how you built your bucket, Roth, pre-tax, after-tax. Well, then what's really interesting is as you would imagine, when you go to turn that bucket over, when you go to start distributing assets to yourself, your strategy is probably going to look something like after tax is going to come out first, and then you're going to pull out your pre-tax, and then you're going to pull out your Roth. Because really, you want your Roth to grow for as long as possible. You want it to be a legacy benefit. You want it to be part of your estate planning strategy. Now, this is oversimplified, I would say, Brian. When it actually comes to true financial planning, decumulation is a more nuanced than that because you might want to pull out all three buckets in a given year so that you can maximize different types of opportunities. But I think this is a great illustration showing you how the paradigm shifts and why specifically the paradigm matters in your wealth building journey.
Yeah, I mean, this is, as you just said, it's nuanced and there's different parameters for different people. And look, we focused on how the buckets are going to get filled. There is an entire different show on how the three buckets impact your investment decisions.
That's right.
Because your asset allocation, by the way, is going to change based upon these tax buckets and where you are in your investments. Because you can imagine, if you have something that can grow tax-free, you want to be aggressive with it. If you have something that is going to grow tax deferred, where it's going to be ordinary income, whether you pull it out now or whether you pull it out in the future, you're probably going to put your boring bonds and other things that aren't tax favored in the way that income is paid out. And then your after tax, it's a mixed bag because yes, we know that capital gains, dividends, as well as other things get tax favored treatment. It is very important that you not only focus on how you fill these buckets up, but how they also are handling your different investments. And that's why I like, as people, if you're a financial mutant in the abundance cycle, I love how we give you tons of free advice. We're going to load you up. You've got to go to moneyguy.com/resources. Tons of free advice there. But there's going to be a few of you that get so excited about all the free stuff. You're going to go fill yourself up with and binge on all of our content. You're going to say, this is great, but it seems like these guys are all over the place. They'll talk about Tesla. They'll talk about mega Roth conversions. I need something that accelerates and hones in on how I accelerate my path. That's where you need to go to learn.moneyguy.com because that's where we're going to have the net worth tool. That's where we're going to have the course of the financial order of operations. And then guess what? There's one more step, and what I love about the abundance cycle is that all of you that have been watching us for years, some of you even for decades since we've been doing this since 2006, I love the excitement when you've reached the level of success that you're like, man, I've reached 7 figures, or I've reached the point that I'm worried who's going to help my spouse out since I'm the nerd, financial mutant, and they're not. Who's going to be the one that helps me from my blind spots? I can't wait to work with you guys. We have as the last step of the abundance cycle is taking the relationship to the next level. We work with clients all across the country. I think watching the 3-bucket strategy and knowing how we think about money, you see that this show is different, but we are doing things different. We have the solutions. You just have to get excited, hone in on what you can save, the discipline. We'll help you maximize it. Just keep tuning in. We're excited about all the things that we're building here at the Money Guy Show. We couldn't do it without you. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy team, building stronger in the new studio, 2022. Team out.